Nothing makes me happier right now than a rainbow tree strap. I'll show you how I sewed the end of the loop. That's a pretty easy project. If you want to make a pair of tree straps along with me, then just keep on watching. I'm really excited to get this in the mail. This is the Spectrum Webbing in the outdoor ink from Ripstop by the roll. And it was designed by Kitsapcowboy on the forums, or Bynum Grahic Design on Ripstop by the roll. And the design was inspired by me, Jellyfish. So I thought that today I would make some tree straps out of this webbing so that I could have nice, bright and cheerful tree straps for my hammock. This is what the webbing looks like up close. You can see it's a beautiful gradation of color from red through to violet, and the color goes all the way to the edge. And I'm very impressed with how this Ripstop by the roll outdoor ink webbing just integrates the color deep into the fibers. This is a beautiful job. So we're going to do a quick and easy project today, just sewing some loops on the end for my tree straps. Let's talk needles. I'm going to use a ballpoint needle to sew this, and the reason for that is because I don't want my needle, when it comes down into the webbing, to actually puncture and break the fibers. The advantage of a ballpoint needle is that it's round on the end, so it will push the needle between the fibers and not through them, so I won't get broken fibers and it won't weaken the strap. So instead of using a sharp needle like a denim needle or a leather needle, which is a very strong needle, I'm using a ballpoint. Now, I'm going to be sewing with this, which is a Mara 50 thread that I also got from Ripstop by the roll. And how to tell which needle size you should use is pretty simple. The needle size that you want to use is really dependent on the size of your thread. So I've threaded my needles here, and I'm just going to show you what I'm talking about. I've got this needle threaded, and my needle is just sort of gliding along the thread, but you can see it's sort of snagging a little. I don't know if you're catching this on camera, but as I'm dragging it, it's hanging up on the thread and it's not sliding super great. This is not graceful, elegant sliding. So this size 14 needle in this brand happens to be too small for this thread. Different brands are going to have different size openings, so just because this particular one doesn't work on this thread doesn't mean that a different brand in size 14 won't work. But let's take a look at the size 16 needle now. I mean, look at that. It just moves back and forth. As I am dangling and moving the thread back and forth, the needle's just going along with it. So I'm going to use my size 16 ballpoint needle on this Mara 50 thread. I'll show you what my plans for the stitching are here. I've got my 1-inch strap. I'm going to have a 3-inch loop here and then 3 inches where I'm going to actually do my stitching. So I'm going to put my needle in the middle. I'm going to turn forward, then I'm going to turn the webbing around and go back that way. Then I'm going to come across, and when I come across like this, I increase the number of stitches per inch in this direction than what I get in that direction, which makes it stronger. So I've got to come across this way, and then I'll sew back, I'll come across this way, I'll sew back, I'll come across this way, I'll sew back, and then I'm going to complete the X's. I'll come across this way, and then I'm going to make another line parallel to this one. Then I'll come across this way, I'll make another line parallel, then I'll come across this way. And when I get to the top here, I'm going to go right along the edges and box everything in. I'm going to go parallel to here and then come all the way to the top here, and then I'm going to come in to here, and then I'm going to lock my stitch. And so in the process of doing this, I will have 2 sets of stitches running along plus 3 boxes, and that's going to make it pretty strong. I've seen other people when they do their tree straps with different methods. I've seen some people that do bars going down, and they're even doing zigzags this way, and I'm sure that's plenty strong. I'm sure that's a great way to do it. The advantage to using the zigzag in this direction is that when the tension is put that way, it is a stretch stitch, and so you're less likely to get stitches popping, which is really good. I've also seen some people do some bars in this direction. I've seen some videos where people are doing zigzags of bars in this direction, and they're using a zigzag. But the advantage of going across is that you have this numerous stitches per inch on the diagonal than you have actually going perpendicular to the strap. So I think that that's what I'm going to do. So we'll be doing this method because I'm using just this area here for dropping my needle in the beginning and the end and locking my stitches here. I don't have to worry about trimming or stray threads that are going to cause me problems in other places. So I think this will be a nice, strong, durable, long-lasting, and safe way of stitching up my tree straps. I have my tree strap now folded over so that I have a 6-inch long loop, and that is going to give me plenty of space here to do a 3-inch open loop, plus I've got 3 inches for my 3X's, and then I've got, if you can see here, just a hair over on the edge so that I'm not stitching right up against the fused edge. I want to give myself just a little bit of space there, like 1/4 of an inch to hang off the end. And I'm going to mark my stitches with a pencil so that I can have a good ready guide, see where I am actually supposed to be sewing. So when it comes time to actually do the stitches on my machine, I'll get kind of a rough idea here. I won't be flying blind. So that's what it'll look like, and we'll put that on the machine. I also want to show you something here on my machine. I have got different types of stitches here. These top stitches are your regular sets of stitches, and these bottom stitches are the stretch stitches. And what a stretch stitch will do is it configures the stitch such that when it gets under tension, the stitch weave will actually have some give to it. And these are placed on your machine so that when you're sewing jersey fabrics or stretch fabrics, that when the fabric stretches you don't start popping stitches. And that is the same type of stitch that we're going to use on the webbing straps. That way, if there's tension placed on the stitches are configured in a way that we will have some give in the stitches and the thread won't break, and that'll make them stronger, right? It's like the philosophy of a bending branch can bend and it doesn't break, something like that. In order to do that on my machine, I need to turn my dial here in this area, and this will give me a long stitch and this will give me a narrow stitch, but this area here will provide me access to this lower level of stitches on the machine. And so this is my first set of stitches. So this is going to be a 1 here, and then I'm going to put it in here, and I'm probably going to do a little bit of a longer stitch so that I make sure I get them in between those weaves in the webbing. So we'll have to play with this a little bit, but this is the stitch type that I'm going to use. Got the stretch stitch on my machine, and my needle and my thread are both loaded. So I'll just set my needle right down in, just sew straight. When I get to the end here, I'll just lift my foot and spin everything around. And I'll also use this opportunity to trim these threads so that they don't cramp my style going forward. And then, because I'm going now this way across it, I'm actually locking all of those stitches all the way across, so that is a nice strong way to lock stitches on the webbing. And now that I'm at the edge, I'm going to follow the marks that I made with my pencil for the X's. And you can see how this stretch stitch, it does a couple of stitches forward and then it goes backwards. And what that does is it makes the stitch so that if there's tugging or pulling on the fabric, which in a tree strap there will be, that the stitch has some give to it before it puts enough tension on the thread that your stitch will break. So that's why we're using the stretch stitch. But again, a zigzag stitch will have the same sort of effect. A zigzag stitch is another really good stitch to use. To the end here. Now as we come on up, we'll start completing our X's in the other direction. I can remove this clip. I don't need this anymore. Now I don't want to sew right on top of my other parallel line. I want to sew just right next to it. So I just want my needle to go in just parallel to that line, but not right on top of it. With this really thick thread, you don't necessarily want too much of these lines going right on top of one another, or else you could be in a situation where your thread will break right in the needle because it's trying to push through all of the layers of thread plus the webbing plus the big needle. We'll come up a bit and do the last. And when we get up to the top here, we'll take it all the way across again, and now we'll complete our box. going to just put my foot so that the edge of this mark on my foot goes right along the edge of the webbing, and that way I make sure that my line is straight, and I don't want to run the risk of having my webbing so close to the edge that it falls off the edge. That would not be good. I'm going to get to the bottom here. Do another parallel line. And then we're coming on up. And I'll bring my stitch into the center. Lock it here. Now I've done 3 X's in a continuous thread without lifting my needle during the entire time. And so I think this is a pretty strong, and this is really in there. There's going to be really a difficult time breaking those stitches, and because we use the stretch stitches, if there were tremendous amounts of pressure, I mean, I'm only so heavy, and even if I'm in the hammock with my dog, I'm only so heavy, but if we were, say, hauling a boat with this, and it were, you know, putting tremendous amounts of pressure on here, the stitches would actually start to stretch before the thread would break, and that's kind of the point. Here we have the 2 sides that I've sewn, the fronts and backs of each one. These are the fronts that I sewed, and these are the backs. So now I'm just going to measure them out. I want my tree straps to be 10 feet long, which some people may think is too long, but there's some white oaks in a place where I like to go, and white oaks are big trees. So that's why I'm going to do a longer tree strap. So I'm just going to cut through that. It cuts easy with my rotary cutter. And I've got a candle here. I'm going to seal the edges. I don't want these fraying on me. I'm just going to take the candle on both sides, give it a good seal. And now I'm going to put my Cinch Bugs on there. I really like my Cinch Bugs. These are really great. And the Cinch Bugs are kind of a tight fit, but they do get through. And that cinches down, and then the Cinch Bug goes through either my whoopee sling if I need the space, or the continuous loop on my hammock. Well, Cowboy, I have to tell you, you really made my day here with my awesome rainbow tree straps when you designed this Spectrum strap material that I got from Ripstop by the roll. I want to thank you for doing that so I could make my fabulous rainbow tree straps. I think that I will always remember to grab my tree straps now since they're so bright and cheerful. And I made them with my Cinch Bugs right on the end. Oh, I tell you, when the sunlight hits the rainbow tree straps, you can really, really see all the colors, and it's so beautiful. It really is nice. Thank you, Cowboy. You're the best. Some of the extra strapping here off the end of my tree strap. My noble dog, Stuart, got a rainbow collar, which he is proudly wearing. in solidarity with all of the hammock campers and their outdoor ink tree straps. So thank you, Cowboy. Not only did I get awesome tree straps, but my dog got this very cool new collar. Thank you, Stuart, for being such a good model and sitting so nicely for your mama.